Epilogue. The First Dance. 3 days after Aliwyn began Miriam's remedy, she could walk again with help. Aelfric's fever left him, and he couldn't stop looking at Aliwyn and how she was coming back to life. The first time she stepped out into the bright sun, he picked her up and twirled her in a circle. Aliwyn laughed. 2 weeks later, a brightness returned to her eyes, and all her wounds healed. It was a miracle. Aelfric eagerly introduced himself and Aliwyn to the peasants who came to grind grain at the mill. Miriam took her 2 patients to visit the garden by the lake, where Aelfric played music for them both beneath the evening skies. Aliwyn talked little, but told him she felt at home with Miriam. Aelfric felt the same. Miriam accepted Aliwyn and Aelfric as apprentices 3 weeks after they'd met. The Brocklesby bailiff recorded their names in a registry, and Aelfric couldn't have been happier to have a home. Identifying herbs and mushrooms was difficult, but he kept trying. He followed Miriam during all her patient visits, except when she visited women. Aelfric practiced his new sling instead. He and Aliwyn also joined the farmers in the fields, and adjusted gears within the watermill when not studying medicine. Aliwyn speared eels with great skill, and supplemented their dinner table with much-needed food. Spring passed into summer. Aelfric befriended the blacksmiths, the baker, the wheelwright, and the carpenter's families. He attended holy day feasts in the Brocklesby marketplace, and played his recorder alongside the town bands. Watching the couples dance made him eager to try it himself. But there was a problem. Aliwyn never attended festivals, and Aelfric didn't feel like dancing with another girl. One sunny afternoon, 2 weeks before his 15th birthday, Miriam left alone to visit an expectant mother. Aelfric mustered the courage to invite Aliwyn to an upcoming holy day, as she rinsed her fishing spear in the stream beside the mill. She wore one of Miriam's beige headscarves, and her brown hair fell gracefully to frame her face. "Aliwyn," he said, his hands behind his back, the feast of St. Barnabas is tomorrow. I want to visit the marketplace with me today." She looked up from her bare feet. "Why go today if the feast is tomorrow?" Because—" He tried to swallow the ball in his throat. "The musicians are practicing today, and the villagers are dancing already. So it's a good time to... To what? Can you teach me how to dance?" Warmth flooded his face. "You must know how, right?" Aliwyn straightened and wiped her hand on her apron. He may as well have asked her to cross the ravine on a tightrope. Her expression would have been the same. "You want me to teach you?" She shook her head. "With all those strangers watching?" "They're not strangers anymore, and today isn't the real festival. There won't be as many people." "I thought Miriam asked you to prepare 12 poultices before dark." Aelfric rubbed his eyes. He'd hoped she wouldn't remember. "I can do that later. The musicians are playing now." Her scowl didn't change, and Aelfric's shoulders sagged. "You know how I feel about festivals," she said softly. "The villagers aren't strangers to you anymore, but they are to me. And you need to start the poultices now, or you won't finish all 12 before dark." Aliwyn jabbed her triple-pronged spear into the stream, even though it was already clean, and Aelfric rolled his eyes. "Why don't I take you to visit all the families in Brocklesby?" he asked. "Then they won't be strangers." "Not today." "There's been at least 5 feasts in Brocklesby, and you've been to none of them." "I don't like festivals, you know that." "Are you ever going to like them?" Silence. She frowned at the bucket of dead eels by her feet, and a dull ache began pulsing at Aelfric's temples. "You're going to live a terribly boring life, you know that." He turned and trudged back to the mill. The wheelwright's daughter had already asked him twice to dance. He said no, but telling Aliwyn that wouldn't change anything. Aelfric carried several bundles of dried plants outside to identify them under the sun. He yawned as he crumbled dried flowers and mushrooms onto linen squares. Medicine was becoming tedious, but he had already agreed to be Miriam's apprentice. An hour later, he was lying on his back and staring at the clouds. Funny how a brief talk with Aliwyn had made him question whether settling in Brocklesby was a good idea. What if he never enjoyed medicine as much as carpentry? He missed using his hands and building things, but Brocklesby already had enough carpenters. Maybe Ray would help him feel better when he met her this Sunday. Aelfric heard Aliwyn shuffling his way. A fishy odour often announced her arrival, and this time was no different. Eel guts now stained her apron. "Do you need some help with the poultices?" she asked. Aelfric frowned at her upside-down face as it hovered above him. "You're not supposed to help me. This is my assignment." "Aelfie, I never said I wouldn't go with you to the marketplace, only that you should finish your poultice pouches first. How about we go when the bells strike vespers?" Vespers meant sunset, and Aelfric sighed. "The music would be over, and I'm not in the mood to go any more." He rolled back up and returned to the scattered plant bundles, hoping Aliwyn would leave him alone. She only stood there as he picked up 2 plant stalks, one with narrow leaves and the other with broad leaves. Which one was comfrey again? And would Aliwyn go away already? Sweat beaded at his hairline. "The one in your left hand is," she began. "Don't tell me!" he shouted, spinning around. Aliwyn turned on her heel and left. Aelfric scratched his eyebrows with both hands until they burned. He had struggled with recipes and made mistakes every week, whereas Aliwyn seemed to memorize everything with ease. She was talented at fishing too, but he only astounded everyone with his appetite. Today, all the resentment and guilt he had tried to bury finally erupted. He was the one who'd wanted to stay in Brocklesby. He should apologize. Aelfric forced himself to finish tying up the poultices. Once done, he dragged his feet to the watermill door and pushed it open. "Ali, I'm changing!" she cried from upstairs. "Stay outside!" Aelfric whirled around and almost tripped. No one bothered to knock in the thrall compound full of men. His face flushing, he sat beside the mill and hung his head between his knees. A bucket of water sloshed within the mill. Before long, Aliwyn's footsteps pattered down the stairs. She stepped outside in a faded blue dress. Aelfric glanced at her, then did a double-take. She'd never worn that gown before, and the colourful woven belt around her waist accentuated her curves. After gutting eels all afternoon, her face was rosy and radiant. Aliwyn giggled. "Why are you staring? This is just Miriam's old dress." I like your belt." "Thanks. It's the one you saw me weaving last week. I wanted to wear it to the marketplace." He blinked. "We're going?" "Yes, it's almost vespers. I told you we'd go." She smiled, but redness rimmed her eyes. He'd probably made her cry, and Aelfric's stomach dropped. He stood up, slowly. "I'm sorry for yelling at you," he said. "I'm not good with herbs the way you are." "You're doing your best, Aelfie." She patted his elbow. "You're already much better than 2 weeks ago." A strange, tingling sensation spread down his shoulders and back. Sometimes, the tingling also happened when he and Aliwyn sweated alongside each other on the fields. He was probably not drinking enough water. Aelfric smiled and followed her lead. The two of them crossed the stone bridge that led to the Brocklesby village. Water gushed in the gorge below them, but no music echoed from within the town walls anymore. The dancing was over, and Aelfric sighed. What could he do with Aliwyn now? Watch the manor lord's servants hang garlands from the rooftops? Still, he didn't want to discourage her now that she'd left the mill for once. The church tower and the manor house rose above the timber ramparts, and the soldiers guarding the town gates nodded in greeting as they entered. Donkey carts milled past them along a dusty road that circled the town periphery. Ahead lay a grassy slope, dotted with sheep, that led to the market square. To his surprise, Aliwyn grabbed his wrist and pulled him onto the road after a cart full of hay.
"What are you doing?" he asked. "The market isn't this way." "Oh, I enjoy taking this route."
Behind the rear of a donkey? Aelfric raised an eyebrow, but decided against arguing. Aliwyn hurried on, and Aelfric tried not to inhale the donkey's stench. She pulled him left at the blacksmith's workshop, where he frowned at the counters devoid of people and the neglected fireplace. All the smithy tools had disappeared, and the workshop's door was ajar. The entire scene made him nervous. Aelfric was just about to pull Aliwyn closer to him for safety when... "Surprise!" A boy swung the door open. "Happy birthday!" cried another voice to his right. Aelfric staggered and spun in a circle, but Aliwyn only snickered. Behind the sooty counters, the blacksmith's children and the baker stuck out their heads and laughed, all wishing him a happy birthday. Aelfric beamed and ran to hug them one by one.
"Why the surprise today?"
He clapped the baker on the back.
"My birthday isn't for another 2 weeks." "Yes, but he won't be here in 2 weeks."
Aelfric turned toward Miriam's voice. She appeared from behind the smithy, and beside her walked a familiar man with a brown beard.
"Wulfstan!" Aelfric's chest heaved. "Is that really you? What are you doing here?"
He bolted toward the man to hug him, but Wulfstan's pristine, embroidered tunic made Aelfric conscious of his stained clothes. Aelfric wiped his hand on his thigh and offered a handshake instead. Wulfstan had a firm grip.
"Happy birthday, my lad," he said with a smile. "I'm Lord Benoit Seville's bailiff now. He sent me to Brocklesby, and Aliwyn recognised me right away."
"Really? Aliwyn doesn't leave the mill much."
Aelfric searched for her, but she had disappeared from his side.
"She spotted Wulfstan during one of our midwifery house calls," Miriam explained. "This surprise was her idea."
Aelfric grew still. It made sense now, why she had tried to keep him home all afternoon. He would have visited the blacksmith and his other friends before the celebration was ready. Aelfric sighed. Where was Aliwyn now? He wanted to find her, but couldn't turn away from his guest.
"I'm so happy to see you, Wulfstan. You said you're a bailiff now."
"Yes. I reported Mablethorpe for failing to meet certain obligations, and its town charter was revoked."
He stroked his beard and lowered his gaze for a moment.
"Lord Seville now governs the area. He kept me as the bailiff of Mablethorpe."
"Mablethorpe had its share of problems, all right. Do you like your work better now?"
"Yes, and I'm recruiting servants for Lord Seville."
Wulfstan grinned.
"You've earned yourself a good reputation, Aelfric. Sir Marcotte and Lord Seville are friends. I was told to visit Brocklesby first."
Aelfric's breath caught in his throat.
"But I'm Miriam's apprentice already. I don't want to leave."
To his relief, Wulfstan placed his hand on his shoulder.
"Then I'll recruit someone else. I'm overjoyed to see you free and doing well."
He explained how he'd had to follow the militia to the Saltfleet convent to avoid appearing suspicious. Thankfully, Aelfric had already left, and a red-headed woman had directed the militia elsewhere.
"Rhea."
Aelfric was silent for a moment. He was only free and doing well because many people cared about him. Unable to resist, he walked into Wulfstan's chest and wrapped his arms around the man's broad torso.
"Thanks, Wulfstan," he said.
The bailiff returned his embrace with a strong arm.
"Blessings, my boy. And I should thank you, too. It may sound odd, but after I saw you defend Aliwyn with only a bucket, I found the courage to report the town's corruption."
They smiled at each other, but Aelfric felt Aliwyn's absence at that moment. This crowd must have overwhelmed her, even though she had planned for it. He'd better find her. He and Wulfstan parted, so the bailiff could mingle with other guests. The baker's wife and sister spoke with Miriam. Everyone was chatting and joking. Children were already serving themselves berry tarts, displayed upon colourful linens. The town bard snapped his fingers in the air to catch Aelfric's attention. It was time to play some festive music. Aelfric held up a finger to give himself more time. He excused himself from the gathering and retraced his steps along the dirt road. His lone shadow stretched across the ground. Outside his vibrant little celebration, the workshops were largely closing, and the streets deserted.
"Elfie?"
came Aliwyn's voice. He found her pressed against the wheelwright's cabin, with her arms around her stomach, like she was in pain. Aelfric shook his head. "Miriam said you planned a surprise. Oh, thank you so much." He reached for her arm. It was hard to act cheerful when her face was grey.
"It wasn't hard to plan, but I had to make sure you stayed at the mill until Vespers."
She gave a quivering smile.
"I didn't mean to upset you."
"It's not your fault. I was being awful to you."
He gathered her into his arms and rocked her slightly from side to side, cherishing the warmth of her forehead and how her hair tickled his chin. She still smelled a bit like fish, but he didn't care.
"I want to enjoy the crowd,"
she breathed in jerks.
"I just can't. I'm sorry."
"It's all right, Ali. I know you tried."
She snuggled against his neck. Every night, she'd massage ointment over the scar on his neck, which had become smoother and less visible each week. Thanks to all the eels she'd fed him, he had grown taller since he'd arrived in Brocklesby. Aliwyn had been a blessing to him every day. Her heart raced against his own, and her slender body relaxed into his arms. The tingling started down his back again. He slipped his hands around her waist, and then it struck him. He wanted to stroke her soft cheeks and kiss her. Aelfric's stomach flipped. He was taking things too far. Aliwyn still didn't know he was half Vasfian, and she'd be furious if she knew. He pulled back and convinced her to at least watch him perform for the celebration. Leading her by the hand, he walked with her back to the gathering, where Aliwyn stood stiffly at the periphery. Aelfric played his recorder alongside a lutist and drummer, but his mind was elsewhere. The rest of the night was a blur. Everyone danced except for him and Aliwyn. The feeling of being an imposter haunted him. He had only told one person who he really was, and she wasn't in attendance. The following Sunday, Aelfric and Miriam met the Vaspians by the lake to trade flour and eggs for honey and dried mushrooms. Aliwyn, as usual, stayed home. Aelfric lingered after the bartering to spend time with Rhea. She had given him a sling and taught him how to use it. They usually competed to see who could strike a beanbag off the branches first, him with his sling or her with her crossbow. Today, Aelfric could barely load a rock. Rhea beat him 4 times.
"Something's wrong."
She cocked her eyebrows.
"Yeah,"
he mumbled.
"Really wrong."
"Something to do with Aliwyn."
"How did you know?"
Aelfric took a deep breath.
I want to court her."
Rhea laughed in his face, and his eyes rounded. "Why is it funny?"
"It took you this long to realise you liked her."
"So it's funny now?"
Fine, not funny."
She waved a hand.
"But go on.
Why is it so bad that you want to court her?"
"Because if I were to marry her, all our children would be part Vasfian. I can't." His throat clogged. "I can't do that to her, but I'm also too scared to tell her the truth."
Rhea aimed her crossbow at the beanbag above them.
"It's that important to you that you tell her about your Vasfian ancestry?"
"Yes. I want my future wife to accept me for all of me."
"Well then." Rhea let loose an arrow, and the beanbag dropped to the ground.
"Why dwell on Aliwyn?" Why not court someone else who won't care about the Vasfian blood in you?
Aelfric's nostrils flared. She was so practical, so right, that he didn't want to hear it.
There are plenty of other girls in Brocklesby and in England, Rhea continued. I don't want to be with other girls. How about treating Aliwyn like your sister? That way, you two could still be close.
Aelfric tilted back, as though she had tried to slap him.
Are you not helping? I can't marry my sister. Well, you say you can't tell Aliwyn the truth without losing her. I agree. So what else can you do?
He shuffled his feet. I don't know.
She can also choose to marry someone else, Rhea said. Or reveal your secret to the world if you tell her.
She wouldn't do that.
He was shuddering in cold sweat now.
You know what? I'm leaving. Rhea's expression fell, and Aelfric struggled to settle the anger surging within him. At least she was frank. She wasn't giving him any false hope. See you next Sunday, he forced himself to say.
I'll be here, as usual, Rhea said, smiling. Aelfric, and one last thing.
What?
A bailiff paid my mother recently so that he could take the route through our forest. He's staying for 2 weeks in Brocklesby to recruit servants for a certain Lord Seville. Maybe you should talk to him.
Wulfstan. Aelfric felt no urge to tell her he had already met the bailiff. Why should I talk to him? He asked. I don't want to leave the mill.
2 reasons.
She held up her fingers as she counted.
1, you don't seem happy pecking at plants.
Aelfric gritted his teeth.
2, if this situation continues between you and Aliwyn, I think you'll want to leave. She's extremely stubborn, and will probably never change her mind about our people.
The last statement pierced Aelfric with grief. All the frustration drained out of him, and he had barely the energy to speak. Goodbye, Rhea. He trudged back along the lake's muddy banks, and Rhea called after him.
Good luck, Aelfric.
She added in a softer tone.
You know I care about you.
Aelfric inhaled slowly. He turned around one last time and waved at her. Rhea smiled back as she sat on a stump with her red braid hanging over one shoulder and her crossbow at her side. Recently, she had told him she was 17 years old. Aelfric had begun to see her as an older sister, and one pretend sister was enough. The two of them agreed to meet again the following Sunday, after trading was over. Aelfric returned to the watermill as the sun slid behind the rolling hillside. Aliwyn stood in the clearing before their home, with hens and chicks pecking nearby. She once again wore Miriam's faded blue dress, and Aelfric averted his eyes. Maybe it was a good thing they'd never danced that night. He might have just lost control, kissed her before a quarter of the village, and thrown himself onto a path he wasn't prepared for. She hurried toward him, with the gown trailing over yellow buttercups.
Aelfie, are you all right? Did the Vasfians give you any trouble?
No, not at all.
Why were you gone so long?
I practiced shooting my sling. He tried to wipe the sour look off his face. Yet one thought remained on his mind. Ali, can you please come with me and Miriam to meet the Vasfians next week? She stiffened, her footsteps coming to a halt, but he pressed on. Maybe one day Miriam and I will both fall ill, and you'll have to trade with them. Aliwyn hardened her lips.
If you're both unwell, I'll just buy from the market.
Please. They, have some mushrooms and herbs the markets never have. Aelfric didn't know where to hide his flushing face. After a moment of silence, Aliwyn closed the distance between them, and her expression softened. She placed a hand on his upper arm.
All right, Aelfie. For the sake of our patients, I'll go with you and Miriam next Sunday.
Thanks, he croaked. He couldn't tell her how much that meant to him, and Aliwyn stared with her brows drawn in sympathy.
But I have to add, I'll just trade and leave, she said.
He nodded. That would already be better than no interaction at all. Aliwyn stroked his sleeve with her thumb.
Are you still sad about not dancing during your birthday celebration?
He'd better give a reason for tearing up. I guess I am.
What if I taught you how to dance this evening? We don't need music.
He swallowed several times.
You mean it? Yes.
She smiled.
Happy 15th birthday to my best friend.
He wanted to be more than her best friend, but he'd have to settle for that for now. Aelfric managed to grin back at her glowing face. Thanks. This has been my best birthday yet. Aliwyn took his hands and counted in sets of 4, showing him the steps she'd do and how he could match her. The chickens clucked and circled them. As hues of gold and pink brightened the edges of clouds overhead, Miriam came out to sing, as Aliwyn continued to show him the movements of both her arms and feet. Aelfric couldn't focus. He stumbled several times, but he didn't care. Aliwyn beamed and seemed entirely at ease. He began to see what kind of person she was before the rebellion, and he blushed. She never lost patience, no matter how badly he danced. He'd do his best to be patient with her. Maybe in 6 months she'd get over her resentment of the Vaspians, and he'd tell her the truth about himself. If she accepted him, he'd court her in hopes of marriage. But what if 3 or 5 years passed, and she was still the same? Aelfric didn't know how long he could wait. He tried not to worry. When a half-moon appeared in the darkening sky, Aelfric and Aliwyn called the chickens back into their coop behind the mill. A flock of wood pigeons flew overhead as they returned to the front door. Miriam had kindled the hearth inside, and smoke drifted from the corners of the roof. She stood, smiling at the opened door of their home. Aelfric took Aliwyn's hand and led her inside.